Hello, friends, and welcome to the 2023 Volunteer Recognition and Awards event. This evening, we're gathered here in Washington, D.C. and around the world online to celebrate the extraordinary and life-changing work of our pro bono volunteers and Capitol Defender partners. For any of you who don't know me already, my name is Emily Olsen-Galt, and I'm the director of the ABA Death Penalty Representation Project, where I have the honor of working with so many of you to ensure that no person faces a death sentence alone. For veterans of this event, I'm sure you've noticed that things are a little bit different this year, and the thing that you may be worried about for those of you here in DC is the food. I promise there is food, and what we're going to do is have our program here, which is being live streamed, and then after that's done, you will have lots of time to go get dinner, sit, socialize, talk, catch up with your friends. The other big change, of course, is our new venue with our 2 rooms, one upstairs and one downstairs, and along with our live stream that's allowing even more people to join in the celebration. Now, is Robin in the room? Robin, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe this is the first time this is the 18th time we've held this event, and I believe this is the first time that we've sold out and had to go to a wait list, and certainly the first time we've had to add on an extra room. So that's really, it's just a testament to our award winners and the impact that they have had on each and every one of you. Yes. So congratulations to Mark Olive and to Venable, and on your very well-deserved recognition. We're really delighted to have this opportunity to honor your extraordinary contributions and to bring together so many of your admirers. So welcome everybody and thank you for being here. I want to extend my gratitude to our event sponsors, and in particular our Defender level sponsors, Kroll & Mooring, back there in the corner, Greenberg Traurig here, and Venable. We really are truly grateful to you for making our work possible. Thank you also. Thank you also to Sister Helen for being here. We are so honored by your presence and that you've agreed to make keynote remarks tonight. And I expect that a little bit, at least, of this overflow crowd is your fault as well. So we're going to give you some of the blame. Last but certainly not least, thank you to my incredible staff who are around here somewhere. There's Laura, wave Laura. Others are around making sure everything runs smoothly upstairs. And to all the many people who volunteered their time to make tonight a success. This was an extra complicated year to put this on, and it could not have happened without so many people putting in such an extraordinary effort. So thank you all. I promised, so I'm going to get to the program here. You didn't come here to hear me talk, but I just want to leave you with this thought that as we listen tonight, we're going to hear about just this almost unbelievable laundry list of accomplishments of our award-winning firms and award winners, excuse me, our award-winning firm and Mark Olive. And as we listen to this, certainly those legal victories are extraordinary and so important, but we need to remember that the impact of their work and the work of so many of you extends far beyond the courtroom. We here at the project believe that the success of our mission is measured not only by the cases we win, but how many lives we impact. And that by being a champion for your client or advocating for a more fair and just system, that you have done something of inherent value, and that is something worth celebrating no matter what the outcome. So thank you all for being here to help me celebrate, to celebrate our award winners, and to celebrate all of you for what you do to bring justice to this world. And with that, I am delighted to turn things over to American Bar Association President Mary Smith. Mary is the first Native American woman to serve as president of the ABA and has had a distinguished career in both the public and private sectors, including serving on the senior team at the Civil Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. She's unfortunately traveling today, so couldn't be with us here in person, but we are honored to have her join us by video instead. And apologies for those who are having a hard time seeing the video.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to join you for the ABA Death Penalty Representation Project 2023 Volunteer Recognition and Awards Program. Tonight, we honor those who work tirelessly on these matters, often over several years, in order to ensure that their clients have adequate representation. I extend my heartfelt thanks to Chair Susie Hoffman, Staff Director Emily Olson-Galt, and the selfless efforts of staff and members involved in the ABA Death Penalty Representation Project. Your work, rooted in compassion, helps to ensure that equal justice under law applies to everyone. Our keynote speaker, Sister Helen Prejean, exemplifies this commitment. Over 40 years ago, she ventured where few dared, providing spiritual guidance and compassion to those who had often been abandoned by family with little to no outside support, facing setbacks at every turn in their complex, often years-long journeys. Death penalty cases are some of the most emotionally fraught any lawyer can face. After law school, I clerked in the 11th Circuit, which covers states including Florida, which still conducts executions. There I witnessed the whirlwind of final appeals, with cases moving rapidly through 6 levels of courts, sometimes in a matter of hours. I felt the enormous weight of that ultimate punishment. As attorneys, we are meticulous in our pursuits, but with death penalty cases, there's an amplified burden and responsibility. Tonight, due to your overwhelming support, we have more attendees than we've ever had in 18 years of hosting this Recognition Awards program. Thank you for the amazing outpouring and interest in this worthy project. We appreciate your attendance in the main hall, overflow room, and those watching via live stream as we celebrate the 2023 awardees. This year's recipient of the Exceptional Service Award is Venable, which took its first case from the Death Penalty Representation Project almost 25 years ago. We also honor the John Paul Stevens Guiding Hands of Counsel Award recipient, Mark Olive, who has dedicated his career to improving the quality of representation for prisoners under the death sentence. You all join a legacy of esteemed honorees, showcasing the best of the American Bar Association. Congratulations.
All right, to start off the presentation of our 2023 Representation Awards, it's my honor to welcome Paresh Patel. Paresh is the appellate team lead at the Federal Public Defender for the District of Maryland, and will help me introduce our first winner, Venable LLP. Now, you'll see in your program books that Paresh's name is not there. And unfortunately, Julie, who was here, scheduled to be here to introduce Venable, tested positive for COVID a few days ago. Common story right now, unfortunately. So was unable to be here tonight. But Paresh generously agreed to jump in at the very last minute and help us present this award. Paresh?
Thank you, Emily, and I'm no Julie Brain, but I'll try to be her. So I'm so happy to be here today to introduce Venable as tonight's recipient of the Service Award for Death Penalty Representation. Tonight, though, we not only celebrate Venable, but we celebrate Venable's beloved client, Mr. Kenneth Leidy, whose federal death sentence has now been vacated. This victory came about because of the masterful work of a dream team consisted of Julie Brain, an attorney whose last name says it all, Jonathan Hettleman, a star associate at Venable, Seth Rosenthal, a former partner at Venable who everybody knows as a legal giant, and many others on the legal team. This team's win in Leidy was historic. Nothing like this has ever happened before. And that's why I have to nerd out for a bit to tell you about it. So please bear with me. The team first convinced the government to concede that 3 of the 5 convictions, counts of conviction, were void in light of recent developments in the law, and the court accepted that. But that was only the first hurdle, because the vacated counts were non-capital counts, non-capital charges, not the count for which Mr. Leidy was sentenced to death. The conviction for the death count, kidnapping resulting in death, remained untouched. But nonetheless, Seth and Jonathan and Julie convinced the court that the vacated non-capital counts poisoned the entire verdict, including the death sentence. So in other words, the court found that there was a possibility that even one juror could have considered the invalid counts in sentencing Mr. Leidy to death. And therefore, the court concluded that the entire death sentence was unreliable and had to be thrown out. Now again, this was a first. This was a first in death penalty work. There's no case in which a federal court has ever vacated a death penalty sentence just upon overturning non-capital counts. And why does this historic moment happen? It's because of the incredible lawyering, some of the finest lawyering that I have ever witnessed. As a consultant in the case, I had the joy of witnessing Seth and Jonathan in action, specifically on the winning claim. Their research was meticulous and their writing was poetic. In fact, the claim was so beautifully written that I hand out their brief like candy now to everyone. It was this gold standard in writing. But it's important to note here that Seth and Jonathan's win in Mr. Leidy's case didn't just happen because of their writing on the winning claim. Rather, the path to victory started over 12 years ago when Seth was appointed to the case. The Venable team, started forming the moral foundation of the case that ultimately convinced the district court that Kenneth Leidy's life was worth saving. So in 2012, this is when it all started, the Venable team filed a petition to vacate Mr. Leidy's convictions and sentences. The team then spent the next 7 years re-investigating the case, which culminated in the filing of a 300-page merits brief. The brief presented compelling evidence that Mr. Leidy was not the one who shot and killed the victim for the offense for which he was convicted. The brief also highlighted that Mr. Leidy was merely a 19-year-old boy who knew nothing other than neglect, trauma, and abuse. The Venable team argued that executing him would not only be inhumane, but also that would fly in the face of well-established scientific research, which shows that the brain doesn't fully develop until well into the 20s. So with all of this messaging, and after 3,200 pro bono hours of representing Mr. Leidy, the Venable team ultimately convinced a very tough judge, and I know this judge because I practiced before him in the District of Maryland, but they convinced Judge Massetti to do the right thing and save a life. And I also wanted to note that Venable's pro bono work goes beyond Kenneth Leidy. Venable has 800 lawyers around the country, averaging 30,000 hours of pro bono work each year over the past 10 years. So Venable has made the world a better place. Seth and Jonathan and Julie Brain have made the world a better place. There's no one more deserving of the award tonight. With that said, I will turn the mic over to my good friend, Jonathan Hettleman, who's going to accept the award for Venable tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paresh. My name is Jonathan Hettleman, and I'm a litigation associate at Venable. I'm so honored to be here tonight to accept this award on behalf of Venable. I want to thank Emily Olsen-Galt and the ABA's Death Penalty Representation Project for organizing this incredible event, for selecting Venable for this award, and more importantly, for their amazing work in improving the quality of death penalty representation around the country. Venable is incredibly honored to join a long list of firms and individuals who have won this award in recognition of their efforts to fight for justice on behalf of those who face the government's ultimate penalty. Representing our client, Kenny Leidy, has been one of the greatest honors of my career as a lawyer so far. It is not often that we, as lawyers in private practice, have the opportunity to represent clients for whom a case is a matter of life and death. That opportunity has been career-affirming for me, and it has shaped my perspectives and my priorities as a lawyer. I want to thank Warren Hamill, Venable's current pro bono partner, and the firm as a whole for supporting our efforts to represent Kenny and for allowing me to accept this award tonight. The truth is, though, I feel a bit fraudulent standing here this evening. There are so many people who have poured their hearts and souls into representing Kenny, dating back to well before I was even in law school. First among them is Seth Rosenthal, who is with us tonight. Seth is a former Venable partner who was appointed to represent Kenny back in 2011. And Seth fought relentlessly on Kenny's behalf for 11 years until he left Venable last year. This award is Seth's. As Venable's pro bono partner, Seth built the firm's pro bono program into what it is today. And as Kenny's lawyer, Seth led teams of Venable lawyers and our co-counsel through thousands of pages of briefing, hundreds of hours of witness interviews, multiple oral arguments, and more than a decade of building a compassionate, trusting relationship with our client. As Paresh mentioned, since Seth was appointed in 2011, Venable lawyers have spent more than 3,200 hours working on Kenny's behalf. But Seth is responsible for nearly 1,400 of those hours. This award, more than anything else, is a reflection of Seth's commitment to fighting on Kenny's behalf. So thank you, Seth, for that commitment over so many years, for your commitment to both the firm and to Kenny, for mentoring me and so many other Venable lawyers, and for showing us all what great death penalty representation looks like. I want to thank our partners and co-counsel from multiple different federal public defender's offices over the years. First, Julie Brain, who you've heard about, was appointed to represent Kenny along with Seth in 2011. Julie is a nationally renowned expert in death penalty litigation. She has been an invaluable co-counsel for all of us at Venable, and she has been by Kenny's side every step of the way for the last 12 years. I wish Julie could be here tonight to share this award with us, but we thank her for her thoughtful advice and her unrelenting advocacy over so many years. I also want to thank the many lawyers and staff in the capital habeas units of the Federal Public Defender's offices in both Delaware and the Middle District of Pennsylvania who have been co-counsel with Seth and the Venable team over the long life of Kenny's representation. And while not officially co-counsel, I want to thank our partners in the Federal Public Defender's Office for the District of Maryland, Jim Wida, Ruth Friedman, and Paresh Patel, who not only referred Kenny's case to Seth, but who have provided incredibly thoughtful advice along the way. Paresh, in particular, deserves special recognition. Not only did Paresh... Not only did Paresh advise us on what ultimately became the winning issue, but through his advocacy in hundreds of other cases, Paresh has played a significant role in creating the legal pathway that ultimately led to success in Kenny's case. And finally, I want to tell you a little bit about our client, Kenny, who is the reason we have all committed to this work. Kenny was born in the fall of 1982 here in Washington, D.C. His father was murdered before his birth, and at the age of 3, his mother, who herself struggled with substance abuse throughout her pregnancy and Kenny's first years of life, slowly and painfully died of cancer at just 28 years old. He was physically, sexually, and emotionally abused, and he was exposed to substance abuse, the drug trade, and more neighborhood violence than any child should have to endure. At just 19 years old, after associating himself with some older boys in the neighborhood, Kenny found himself facing the death penalty. Of course, he was convicted and sentenced to death under the government's mistaken theory that he shot and killed the victim. But that was then. Now, almost 22 years later, Kenny is 41 years old. He has good days, bad days, challenges, and triumphs, just like the rest of us. In his words, he is a perennial work in progress. But whether he is on death row or anywhere else, he has so much to offer the world. He is a loving and engaged father and godfather. When his daughter and goddaughter were in school, he reached out to their teachers and corresponded with them over the prison email system so he could have regular updates about their progress and make sure they weren't falling behind. In 2019, he started the Lighty Project with his goddaughter, which provides monthly meals to individuals in DC experiencing hunger, housing instability, and homelessness. And he is a prolific writer. He has published 2 books, including a guide to young people from impoverished neighborhoods on how to avoid the types of bad decisions that resulted in his incarceration. It doesn't get more confined and isolated than a prison cell on death row. Yet Kenny goes to great lengths to reach beyond the walls of his small cell and beyond the walls of his prison to support his family and to make the world a better place. As I mentioned, Kenny is a writer, and I'll leave you with some words he wrote a few years ago in an online essay. During the last 6 months of the previous presidential administration, I was forced to watch 13 men die by lethal injection. These were men with whom I had spent the last 15 years, day in and day out. Men whose faces I saw and whose voices I heard every single day, with no break in between. To this day, I can still look across the hall into an empty cell that once housed one of my friends and sometimes see his face looking back at me. When I was escorted to the computer from which I typed this essay, I imagined hearing one of them calling out to me. When I look through my photos during moments of nostalgia, I avoid the stacks that contain pictures of my friends taken during the last days of their lives. When I want to read old letters that take me back to happier times, I avoid certain envelopes because I know they contain short letters from those friends penned during their last days, telling me how proud they are of me and that they need me to keep pressing forward because I am a beautiful story that needs to be heard. Kenny is indeed a beautiful story that needs to be heard. His life, like all of the others on death row, is worth fighting for. And I thank Kenny for trusting us with the privilege of representing him and for working every day against all odds to give more to the world than was ever given to him and to leave the world better than he found it. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Jonathan, for those incredibly moving and inspirational words. A perpetual work in progress. I think, honestly, all of us can say that about ourselves. And thank you to you and to Kenny for reminding us why we do the work we do, because we believe that everybody is a work in progress and that they deserve a chance to be the best version of themselves. So thank you so much, and congratulations to you and your colleagues on this very, very well-deserved honor. Our second and final award of tonight is presented to longtime project friend and supporter Mark Olive, who it turns out is a bigger draw even than the man who his award is named after, Justice John Paul Stevens. So to introduce Mark, well, I hope I get this right. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I believe first we are going to hear from Denny LeBoeuf, all right, who has a special message to read from, I don't know, the man who's my hero and probably the hero of half the people in this room, Tony Amsterdam.
So there are so many friends in this room. It's just really wonderful to see this. I want to say a few words about Mark, just a few. And I'm going to say mine first because I'm not going to follow Tony. You know, I'm not an idiot. The reason that Helen wanted to come tonight is that a few years ago, when she was struggling with the case of Richard Glossop, who had asked her to accompany him to what looked like his certain execution, she said, we have to have somebody who can help us in post-conviction. We need another lawyer. Who should we get? And I said, well, go for the top. Let's ask Mark. And maybe between the two of us, we could get him to say yes, and we did. And they formed not only a wonderful working relationship on that case, but a great friendship, too. There are so many things to say about Mark as a lawyer, including the fact that when you asked me after, several decades of doing this work, who I want, I say I want Mark. And I consulted Mark in my own work many, many, many times. And one of his great acts of kindness and respect for me was to send Tivon Chartle 48 hours after a death sentence into a court in the state of Florida to argue that I had a profound conflict of interest and should be kicked off the case, so, hoping to thereby save our client. So, but what I want to say is not about your lawyering, Mark. Is what I want to say is this room is filled with love for you, and it's not because you're just such a fuzzy teddy bear. It's you can't do this work with just a brain, even the biggest brains that we've got. We've got, a brain trust sitting just here with Michael and George and you, and that's not enough. You can't do this work with that. You can't stay in it. You can't make it happen. Paresh talked about the moral framework that you needed. That's what you need. And you have the love for your clients and for your struggling, clueless co-counsel sometimes, and for the humanity in all of us that Thurgood Marshall talked about when he said we do ourselves the highest compliment when we recognize the humanity of another. And I love you. So many people in this room love you. You are a great spirit as well as a great lawyer. Now I'm Tony Amsterdam. In hard times, a community of purpose needs a special kind of hero. These are hard times for us in the death penalty defense community, and Mark Olive is that kind of hero. I make this point for starters because many of you are too young to have known any time when the courts were much better. But believe me, as a guy who has been in the game for 60 years now, today's justices and judges are as bad as they come. And we badly need a model of inspired dedication to sustain us. Mark provides it. He combines a resolute, selfless commitment to the cause of capital defense with a depth of experience, a breadth of technical proficiency, a wealth of creativity tempered by realistic expedience, and a compassion for our client population that is not mawkish, but is firmly rooted in the understanding that human beings do not freely choose the destinies they suffer. As a litigator, teacher, planner, mentor to many of us, and as the builder and mainstay of programs, projects, and institutions that support the nationwide capital defense effort, Mark stands out even among the many superb lawyers in our ranks. Most every Labor Day, 4th of July, and Martin Luther King Day, I get an email from Mark asking whether I am working or using the holiday as an excuse to slack off. Whether this is a genuine call to rally to the cause or is the product of a warped sense of humor is unclear. Probably both. Mark is the kind of guy who exploits his imperfections to tactical advantage. I figure he is teaching me to do the same. That's the sort of leadership the John Paul Stevens Award celebrates and the sort we are honored to follow.
Don't know why that's so large now, but you all get the idea. All right, so obviously one introducer is not enough to really with Tony in absentia here. So now I'm going to invite Michael Laurence to come up to the podium and say a bit more about Mark.
Well, I'm not going to follow Tony Amsterdam. And instead, I wanted to read some words from the Honorable Judge Rosemary Barquette. Many of you know that she was the former Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court, the former judge on the 11th Circuit, and now is the judge at the Iran-United States Claims Tribunal at The Hague. Mark, I wish I could be there in person to congratulate you. Though as I am recovering from COVID, perhaps you are just as happy that I am sending my congratulations. In addition to being pleased that you are being recognized, I wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for using your gifts and energy to represent those least able to defend themselves. Thank you for being willing, with such patience and grace, to take the many slings and arrows hurled at you simply because of those who you represent. Thank you for persevering when others burn out and continuing with often thankless effort. And thank you for undertaking such a huge part of the burden that ought to be shared by all of us. Enjoy the day. You have more than earned it. So I'm going to be brief in my remarks because I hear there's a PowerPoint. And if you have ever been through Mark's PowerPoints, you know they will be sometimes lengthy. For over 4 decades, Mark Olive has influenced litigation strategies in virtually every state that has or had a capital punishment statute. He began his legal career in our community in 1980 when he answered a call from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and ended up taking on this enormous work. He has learned to actually make those calls himself, but that began his career in this community. Since then, he has represented dozens of people individually, sentenced to death, trained and nurtured more than 2 generations of capital defense attorneys in private practice, defense organizations, and law firms that have agreed to provide capital representation. And most importantly, has guided litigation strategies in literally hundreds of cases. He has and continues to impart a rigorous work ethic and client-focused perspective that both motivates and elevates the work of others. It has been said that when the country repudiates the death penalty, as it will, people will look back at Professor Anthony Amsterdam and say he devised the campaign that led to this. It is equally accurate to say that when that time comes, people will remember Mark Olive as the person who was instrumental in both waging that campaign and saving from execution so many people during the struggle. I am honored to participate in honoring Mark Olive's decades-long contribution to our community.
He said there was a PowerPoint.
It's only 75 slides.
I can see the slides. It's 79.
People can peel off as they get bored with this. It's all right. This won't be the first time. Thank you so much for the award, and thank you, folks from around the country who have taken the time and energy to come to this proceeding. It really is breathtaking for me, and it's quite a challenge to fulfill those nice comments about me. You're going to go, that's him, that guy. So we'll see. We're going to have a little fun and talk a little bit about people who have guided me throughout my career, continue to. Is that a reverb? Many of them in this room. But first, thanks to the ABA. I really appreciate it. We've named the people in the project, and thanks to Tony Amsterdam and the committee that selected me for this award from, I think, many nominees. So thank y'all. And Tony Amsterdam, my nominee, or my nominator, I've known for an extremely long time. Probably the first time I ever worked with him was when faxes were the way to communicate legal pleadings. And he told me, yeah, just fax it to me and I'll fax it back. So I did that. And then I get something back, and the first page says, "This is the best piece of work I think I've ever seen." And then the next 3 pages were completely black. And I said, something wrong with my toner on this thing. And I called Tony. He said, "No, I just changed a few things." Just changed a few things. It's great, but you know, where we know the beginning of his career, although his education career of us preceded. And the types of work he's done run the gamut of social justice. I'm not going to go through the list. If you can read the list from where you sit. If you can't, it's every freedom we hold dear. He's had something to do with it. In our community and for our purposes. And he's written a lot, he's taught a lot to all of us and to a core of students nationwide that have contributed to justice and social justice. This is one of my favorite books. It really is a great cure for insomnia, but just because the footnotes are so dense, but if you just ignore the footnotes, it's really a great book. And he taught us early on, and taught me quite well, that people, my grandmother used to say, people same as folks, which means what? It means that every generation's the same, every person's the same, everyone relates to people the same way, and they list them: treachery, revenge, honor, reward, defeat, overcoming. Those are our clients' plights. Those are our plights. And so long as we can work with our clients and convey familiar human plights, then we get in the way of good luck and perhaps can win a case or two. And Michael Laurence, he also helped with the nomination, not the nomination, but I know that he twisted some arms and probably left more messages than you cared to have in your inbox to try to get to some of y'all here. So some are here just to shut you up and leave you alone. That was interesting what you said about Justice Stevens. This is on his 90th birthday. May I ask you a hypothetical? You know there's some hell coming on. Something's about to happen. You know, the other side of the coin is about to come out, and it's so polite. Nice. Can I ask you? Just got this little question I want to ask. I've got some examples of some hilarious questions he's asked, but I don't have enough time for them. But with that wind up, I've got a story about the ABA and volunteer lawyers and former president of the ABA. And the story is about Leonel Herrera, who was a Texas death row inmate who was on his last appeals, and it was determined that he would get a stay through some convoluted machinations. And I was working on the case and had worked on the case, and I knew that I shouldn't sit at counsel table. You know, it's kind of like Molotov tossing liberal. So I'm sorry, I skipped Ellie. Did Ellie come? I don't think Ellie came. This is Ellie Hopkins, who investigated Herrera's case for us and for me, and came up both with mitigation, but more importantly, the hook in the case, which was his dead brother did it, which raised a few suspicions. But anyway, so Sandy Dallenberg agreed to come forward, and at the time he was the ABA president, and operate pro bono. Actually, he paid a little money for drinks now and then for some people that witnessed. And here he is. Patsy, are you here? Oh, hi, Patsy. Sandy's partner and spouse, he's deceased now, is here. And they worked equally together in the last decades of his life. And there he is arguing before a very different United States Supreme Court. And as I want to do, there I am hiding from I had nothing to do with it. Who's this guy? But the point is, the ABA supports the work that we do, and they support it not in just words, but actions. And you don't know how much I appreciate that, and you don't know how much volunteer law firms it's needed. So thank y'all. Congratulations on your award. Very well deserved. And you come from a great lineage. All right, well, the court didn't think so much of that. And so they denied relief. You know, if John Q. Citizen or Jane Q. Citizen's walking down the road and you happen upon them and say, do you think it violates the Constitution to execute an innocent person? They go, well, yeah, I would think so. Well, show it to God, so it said the Supreme Court, according to various journalists and cartoonists. Now, Sandy, to bring this full circle, and Justice Stevens were very, very good friends for 35 years. And when Justice Stevens, when Sandy passed, Justice Stevens was elderly, and he wrote an article praising Sandy for his work. And then Justice Stevens died, so it didn't come out. And someone waited a respectful amount of time before calling Chambers and saying, you know, he was working on this article, and we just wonder what the status of it is. They said, yeah, it's finished. It's sitting right here. So they sent it, and it's in the Florida State Law Review. There's a site for it, and it's a great article. It shows a great friendship. And it's said to be the last thing ever published by Justice Brennan, and I don't know whether it's true, but it's exactly what I've heard. So, all right, so that's great. It's great being in front of the Supreme Court. Does anybody know what this is on the left? This actually is my son. Before an argument, Chris Vassell may be here. Chris, are you here? Is he upstairs? Where is he? Chris is here. He's here. I can't find him. Well, he let us in. He was the emergency clerk that I worked with, Seth, you worked with for years and years and years before his retirement. And I hope he's been having fun traveling as he said he was going to do. But he led us into the highest court in the land, which is literally a basketball court above the Supreme Court. And so John played a little b-ball. And when we came in and opened the door, it was blaring rap music, just blaring. And John's going, "This is a cool place." So Supreme Court stuff's pretty neat. John's over here with. He's a little older now, and he's a great photographer. John is, and also a lifesaver. When COVID started, that's a scary picture. And he was a nurse in Colorado and came to Johns Hopkins as a traveling nurse and scared the hell out of me being a COVID caretaker and saving lives. So, John. All right, now that was an introduction. Okay, then, I promise not to go to the Magna Carta, but I'm going to start a little bit further back. This isn't really necessary, except I grew up in Tennessee, and I graduated undergraduate and law, and went into private practice and started teaching in Knoxville. What's important is I stayed in Tennessee for a little while. And this is my brother and his then fiancee, Barbara, now his spouse and partner. They're sitting here on the second table in the back. And their importance to me, Bob was a divinity student. I'm not sure he was when that picture was taken at Vanderbilt. But this person on the left here, look at that guy on the right. Oh, Jesus, that's funny. Shoot. This is on their marriage. And Harmon Ray, who was also, the guy on the left's named Harmon Ray, who was also a divinity student, officiated, or he may have been a graduate at that time. In any event, very spiritual, religious man. And somehow they planned, I was living in Tennessee, somebody planned a trip to the United States Supreme Court to protest the execution of John Spinkelink, which was the first non-volunteer execution in the country. And I was against the death penalty because of my upbringing and religious upbringing, even though my parents had the same one. And they liked the death penalty. So it's a weird church, what comes out of it. So here, that's Harmon right there. And this is a letter from Judge Fauntleroy that some people that have lived in D.C. for a while. Our lawyer said, go do the protest they don't arrest anybody for civil disobedience in D.C. And if you can see here, the name Marky Olive appears as a USA versus somebody, and Harmon Ray beneath it appears as the next person. So that's my brother leading me down the path to 3 days at Central Cell Block. They will not, it still exists, right? Central Cell Block. It was a nasty place, boy. It was, whew. Anyway, so that's why I started. And then Jim Liebman, who somehow got the conspiracy that I had been to Florida Day and executed on the Supreme Court steps. He called me, I was teaching at UT, he called me and said, can you find somebody in Knoxville to help me represent this guy? I said, yeah, sure, no problem. Of course I couldn't, and so I had to call him back and go, no, I couldn't, but I'll do it. That's how we get law firms. That's not to tell y'all anything secret, but that's how you get a law firm. So I joined. I've used that line a lot. And just carry our bags or whatever. And here we go with this devolution. This is Jim in the middle, our client on the left, and me on the right. And then you drop down maybe a decade. Who do you think fared the best in that decade? That would be the client, Mr. Houston. And Henry Martin knows a lot about this, the federal defender in Nashville. There he is on the far right of that photograph in the white shirt, and he helped with the case and the litigation right across the street, and that's Richard right there upon his release from prison. So when someone says, can you find somebody to help us, why not you? There's somebody that, that's what you can get from it, is somebody actually out, not off death row, out of prison. While I was in Knoxville, there were some things that didn't go so well. This guy I tried when I was 2 years out of law school. He got the death penalty, you know? Why do you think that was? I was 2 years out of law school. And when he was finally executed, the only person I've ever had a trial with that got executed, had capital trials with different convictions, but not first degree and not the death penalty. I was talking to David and I said, you know, if I only knew then what I know now, I wish I did. He looked at me and said, I wish the hell you did too. So, all right, Dave, good sense of humor, thanks. All right, then I went to UNC Chapel Hill to teach. Ken Brown was the dean then. Rich Rosen was a clinical director there. I represented Doug Williams under their tutelage, under their guidance. And Doug Williams' case, the Fourth Circuit held that Mills applies in North Carolina. It doesn't matter what Mills says. It's just helped an awful lot of death row inmates. And he did not get reversed on cert. So thanks to Ken and Rich, who are still with us but couldn't make it. And then Florida, the move to Florida. No one's leaving now, so we're going to talk about Charlotte Holman. Everybody says she's nasty. No, she's not nasty. That is one happy, kind, engaged individual. And then she's a little different when she's talking to law firms and trying to get them involved in cases. Steve Malone over here, who worked with me down there, nodding his head. Yeah, she could be kind of nasty. Well, you know, over the years, a lot of people have said, yeah, she can be kind of nasty. So we opened a small office to fight the death penalty because there had been 8 executions in 1984 in Florida, and volunteers had dried up. Volunteer law firms, I mean, enough, you know, we put them on 8 cases. And we opened the Volunteer Lawyers Resource Center, which became the first resource center in the country. And there were like 18 or 20 after that. And so we had a $100,000 grant, and I hired 5 people with $100,000. So it's like, shut up, take it. It's the best we can do. And Patsy, we stayed in a conference room. That was our office at Florida State University when Sandy was the dean at Florida State University, Sandy Downward. So we had a few all-nighters. That's Jimmy Lohman. I mean, I interviewed for the job with Charlotte Holman and Jimmy Lohman. It's like, oh my God, what am I getting into? And here's some more all-nighter. I don't know what I'm doing with an atlas in my lap. And John at least knows an atlas, I think, but there's a lot of people that, what the hell's that? So that's what I call an all-nighter, because this is what we got. 7 days, 10 days, and death. That's what a warrant was, 7 to 10 days. So you get what you can, and you throw it up on the modern K-Pro computer. Anybody here used a K-Pro? Oh my God. Whoa, it's called a portable. And literally, I wrapped it up and stuck it in the luggage bin underneath a Greyhound bus and rode it to Steve's place at what school, what college were you at? Stetson, and little office building down there, and it was crazy. But at least it had WordStar. People know WordStar. You know, the best thing about WordStar is that it had codes. Yeah, you could actually use the codes. And then it went to Word, and WordPerfect, and WordPerfect had codes. But Word doesn't have any codes. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? It does. So neither Tony nor I ever left WordPerfect. And there are people around here going, we threw WordPerfect out decades ago. It's like, well, sorry, of course, Tony and I both still use AOL, so it's not really feasible. All right, we did a lot of this in Florida, unfortunately, burying our clients literally in this circumstance. I'm on the right-hand side there. You can't really tell because of the contrast, but there it's a little better. Well, it's just me. So, and that's the uniform, a white shirt and blue jeans. And I thought there'd be some people honoring the outfit, but I don't see too many of them here, but that's all right. So we did a lot of this, and it was very painful, and this was literal, but a lot of figure of deaths, bad deaths in Florida during that time. And this person that's being buried is David Funches. He was a veteran. It's the first time my dad said they shouldn't execute that guy. And I said, why? He said he was a veteran. And he was not opposed to the death penalty. So it's kind of like whose ox is getting gored. And he said, no, they shouldn't be executing that guy. First, I mean, he could knock me over with a feather. Marvin Francois was the first person I had executed, whose trial I didn't do, for a crime in Overtown, Florida, and part of Miami. And it was a tough case. I won't get into it, but he was a big Superfly fan, and little child running wild. Anybody know that song? Is a great song, and he wanted it played over the radio because he had time, a couple of hours, where he could talk with us before they killed him, and that's what he wanted to hear. So we kept playing it over and over and over again. So that's what was going on in Florida. And this is probably the worst moment. Darden versus Wainwright. I'm missing a slide. There's no slide next. Yeah. The Supreme Court, the prosecutor argued in this case it's a murder rape of an elderly woman by a white woman by a black man. The prosecutor argued he should have a collar around his neck, attached to a leash, and made to crawl around on the floor like a dog. That was the argument. It doesn't all come through in the opinion, but that was the argument. And the Supreme Court said, well, that's all right. So Darden, and that one kind of didn't sit well with me. Darden, when you're looking for some good law on a closing argument claim, forget about it. I created some really bad law for all of us on that. And bad law gets created under warrant situations. All right, there was fun. That's Steve Malone with my son, John. This is first offense Steve Malone. We were representing a guy that had, and I keep telling these stories, but there were other people, and there are people who have taught me and led me and guided me. Not this time. The defendant had buried an infant alive and killed it. Steve was asking for a stay of execution. The judge described the crime as gruesome, and Steve responded, well, it's his first offense. I'm going, his first offense, damn, he started off with a bang, didn't he? Good God, man. Of course, Steve also is the only person I've ever known to not just spill a glass of water in his lap, but a pitcher of water in his lap in an argument in the 11th Circuit. I mean, the point is, get behind the lectern. When you get up there, stay behind the lectern. So those are some fun times, except for the execution of that gentleman. This is Omar Blanco, who I was privileged to the State Department actually let me leave the country through Merida and go to Havana and then go out into the hinterlands. And so I found the thatched hut where Omar Blanco's mother lived, and she gave me this picture of Omar Blanco, who had been convicted in Fort Lauderdale of murder. And I went down there to visit. They couldn't believe I was there. I couldn't either. I didn't speak Spanish. So it was a little difficult. But a great picture. He's still alive. And this is Craig Bernard, who is a close associate of Dick Burr's, who I miss. He had COVID, couldn't make it. In Charlotte, he passed. But he worked very hard for years in West Palm, and then won Hitchcock in the U.S. Supreme Court with a Justice Scalia saying it couldn't be clearer that this statute violates the Eighth Amendment. It's kind of like, well, it wasn't too damn clear for the last 13 executions, but it couldn't be clearer. But he also later said, that's the last time I'll ever vote for mitigation. So, all right, what else did I learn there? Oh, this guy, George Woods. This is not from 1985, but It was from 3 days ago, and we've kind of, he's trying to show his utter contempt for travel anymore, because he's traveled his whole last 30 years since I've known him. And Charlotte introduced us in 1985, and we did a presentation in Monterey, California together. And he's been a really good friend since then, and became best friend in the last 5 years or so. So I've got more to say about him in a minute. He's an MD, a psychiatrist. And where is Chris? Is he in the spillover? So he can't, I can say anything I want. They talk so much now about the shadow docket as if, boom, it came out of nowhere. Well, that's just silly. In the 80s, when we had execution dates scheduled, everything was disposed of on the shadow docket. And I would talk, Chris was my regular companion. Three days a week I was on him. We were talking about the shadow docket, and we didn't call it that. We just said, all emergency applications, especially then capital cases, are resolved in the middle of the night by justices without there being any briefing, argument, etc. So that we work the shadow docket. Okay, I'm a third through. No, I'm more than that. Then we go to Georgia. This is the Georgia Resource Center. This is I think, head of the Georgia Resource Center when I got there. She originally, I think, was working with George Kendall, who is here with the ACLU project in Georgia doing death work. And George left for another social justice position. And Patsy joined the Georgia Resource Center around the same time. She's now passed. And then the next heads of the Resource Center were these two. That's Ellie Hopkins and Mary Shellman. Mary's here apparently. Ellie is not, because they took forward Patsy's, or certainly Mary did, Patsy's knowledge and understood the scope of statistics in all of the cases to date, who was executed, who represented them, who wasn't executed, who represented them. So you could just ask her a question and she'd spit it out, knocking ashes off the end of her cigarette. But she'd spit it out, and she didn't know, she'd pull it out of her files. So she was terrific, and they were terrific. All right, then we have what I learned in Georgia, and what I tried to teach in Georgia was compassion to go with law. And I really learned it firsthand from Ed and Murphy Davis. I know I saw Ed. I don't know where he went, but is he out there? They opened the open door, and it was a community that they created, and I'll explain a little bit more about it later, to help feed the homeless, give them showers, give them clothing, and give them food, and give them an ear. I thought, what lawyers need to know? And that's what they need to know. And then they need to know to kick butt. When it's time to quit talking and start working, take over a building. And they based their work on Dorothy Day and the Catholic Workers Movement, and I'm not proselytizing. You can get this from anything. There's all kinds of religions you can get it from, philosophy you can get it from, your parents you can get it from. It doesn't have to be Catholicism. But they opened, Dorothy Day, what's called houses of hospitality. And that's an example on the left. That's the open door. And those are the people being provided for 2 doors down from our office at the Georgia Resource Center. And so lawyers and investigators and others who came to the Georgia Resource Center would say, "What am I reading today?" And I'm going, you're making lunch. It's lunch day. You can go right over there, and when they come in to eat, sit down with them, have some soup, have some coffee, learn from them, because they got a lot to tell you. You know, they're not just vagabonds. They're people down on their luck and disadvantaged. So back to the open door and the raise hell when you have to. This was the Imperial Hotel. They were going to do something with it that was not helpful. And it was decided, well, we'll just raise hell about it and take it over. So they took it over for several days to protest the treatment of the homeless in the city. But that's not all they did. You can see there in the front, witnesses against executions. They had people on death row that they visited all the time, gave money to all the time. They had family members, etc. So they were terrific and are terrific. It's carrying it on. And then we had volunteer counsel. This is a case from 1989 where it violates the Georgia Evolved Standard of Decency to execute an intellectually disabled person. Well, I've never heard before that Georgia has a greater standard of decency than the other 49 states. I'm sorry, Georgia. I mean, I love Georgia, but you read that and you go, really? So that was 1989, and Atkins didn't come out till 13 years later. And look here who is on it. Paul Hastings. Bondurant Mixon. How about that? Law firms make a difference. Here they were counsel and they were amici. So it's an award well received and well earned when you get that award. All right, here's some folks that worked there. Jeff Ertl, who's here. Brian Mendelson is here. Beth Wells is here. Gretchen Stork is here. A lot of them went to the federal defense. These 4 went to the federal defender office in town after they left the resource center. So they've stayed with the work is the point. You know, they've continued to do it. Some great wins, Felker, crazy case, Williams and Farrell. And here's a great one, Brian and Alex Williams. Alex Williams was psychotic and so bad he wouldn't leave his cell, so they chained him up and dragged him out and videotaped it, for God's sake. I wouldn't do that. But they did. And the clemency folks got a hold of it because of Brian's work, and clemency was granted. So, had a tragic ending later, but for clemency purposes and fighting purposes, Brian and others of his ilk from the Resource Center days went on. I heard all that talk about Julie Brain. Well, I not only sent them to the open door, I sent them to New Hope House. New Hope House was a place that did the same thing, that would put people up when they wanted to come see clients, and when there were executions pending, people would stay there. And it needed a paint job. So I said, dudes, go paint this place. They said, I thought we were going to read some law today. I said, that's a lot of law out there, so go do it. So there's Julie. You're right, she's brilliant. She and deserves all that praise, I didn't know what she was doing with that case, but sounds like she did a wonderful job, as did the rest of the firm. There's Jeff, and there's Ellie. So they went on. After painting houses, they went on. And then last but not least, we've got, there's there's the uniform, white shirt, blue jeans. I know I'm way over, but it's life. And there's Jeff actually wearing shorts, for God's sake. And Steve Bayless, and a law student there in the right rear. So that's what we did in the office. There wasn't a lot of work going on, right? So feed people, paint houses, play basketball, and get a Frisbee. So, all right, this is Virginia. Rob's here from Virginia, other people from Virginia. This was a killing field. I won't go into Dick's work there, but and I'm not going to make you read all these names, but just look at this. 5 executions in 26 days. 3 executions in 33 days. 3 executions in 28 days. 3 executions in 27 days, 45 days. They emptied, decimated death row. But at the same time, look at this. CERT grants all over the place out of Virginia. It's kind of hard to figure. Some of those were victories. Atkins was one, of course, and but Williams, great. So, and then there was other happiness. This is Rob Lee, who's sitting. Where are you, Rob? Are you in here? Hey, Rob. This is Rob and Deirdre, his wife, and that's Justice Brennan. And guess who's in Rob's arm other than son Brennan? So that was great, and they were great. And here's Swan. We won Calvin Swan's case in clemency, and I met Sister Helen for the first time. You won't remember this, Helen, but it was I make a big impression on people, and it was in a church raising money. I bet Rob remembers it for death penalty defense. And again, you fared better than I have fared, so that's good. All right, I won't spend any time back in a little bit of time in Tallahassee. The work I've done there. Tevon Charles is going to speak about his experiences working for me directly. The Administrative Office of the Courts has funded and supervised work around the country for capital habeas units, which are defense organizations to represent people on death row that are in federal defender offices. They never existed before 95 or 96. And they hired John Bloom and me in 95 to come up with a way, or help come up with a way, to get more defense, and that's what was settled upon. And that gentleman there is probably the most person who drove things more than anyone in that regard to that time period. The beautiful thing about this office is they're dedicated to the clientele, but also to protecting programs from being defunded, right? So you can't keep thriving if someone's cutting your legs out from under you. And so they taught me politics a little bit. So, okay, so there were like 5. I'd say that this table right here contains how many people did the death penalty defense in 1985. This is a meeting 2 days ago with just the heads of the offices that were doing doing capital work. There's another 3 rooms of people or 4 rooms of people doing the work. But this is just amazing how many people are doing the work now. It's ought to be attributed to the AO. All right, quickly, I said they hired John Bloom and me. There's John. I don't know why they hired him. But they hired me, and then we got Denise Young involved, so that was the original hat. And this is the person that's kept us in check for years. We didn't think we had any schedules. We didn't have any. You'll get it when you get it. You know, a program or something. She go, It's like, wow, that's fresh. All right. Also, while I was in Florida again, we did Atkins, and that's Dick Burr there doing Atkins there. Dick and I have he's one of my best friends. I wish he could have made it. We had a retrial on remand from the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court didn't say he wasn't ID. They said that if he is, you can't execute him. So we went back for a hearing on it. Rob was there. Lisa Greenman, who is here, was there. Yeah. And experts who we've used before and used today were there, all of whom are guiding hands, and all of these folks are guiding hands. And they saved that guy. And a lot of people, right? A lot of Atkins stuff going on still. All right, now we've got Russ Stadler and Monica Foster. Russ Stadler was the former National Mitigation Coordinator, and again, guided me. That's Monica Foster. Still guides me, as does Russ. And we were smart enough or kind enough to cut the drinks out of the bottom of the picture there. But and Monica is, you know, there's no telling what Monica will say, and she's going to get the mic in a little while, and she's going to say some things. I don't know what they are. But after the AEDPA came out, we had meetings with Liebman and others, and people got assignments, and you know, I got an assignment, and I did the research. I came back. I reported on my assignment, and they said, "What the hell were you looking up that for?" And I'm going, "You told me to look up this." So she passed me this note that I have kept, which is, no matter how paranoid you are, you're not paranoid enough. So that's from Mo to Mo. It's a great note. It's got a few coffee stains or something on it, but anyway. And then Steve Hanlon is here. If anyone comes to you and says, "You want to be a plaintiff?" You know, go, "Well, can they depose me?" They go, "Yeah, no, I don't want to be a plaintiff," but I was, and he protected me and won 2 lawsuits on basically standard of care, but really money for post-conviction work. Steve is going to say a few words. This is George again. There we are in Pakistan. Robin on your right, who now is the head of DPIC, but has had as many jobs as I have over the years. Arranged this trip to improve justice in Pakistan. That's the former Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. Is it Mike Wolf? Michael Wolf? Yeah, nice guy. And Jacob Dugan on death row in Florida from 75 until 2013, when we got relief for him, a whole new trial. after that long on death row. The good work of Bill Shepard, who guided me, Dick Burr, who guided me, Susan Carey, who wanted to come but couldn't, and that Sandy guy pops back up again. All right, then we've got Sellers, which was a Georgia case that we won, and Justice Breyer wrote the opinion. And I'm told someone approached him at a party after that and said, "Congratulations on that opinion, that's great." And he said, "Well, when you figure out what it means, you tell me." That's why I describe it as the case that will not be defined. And this is the person or one of the people responsible for getting that case to the Supreme Court, and that's Brian Kammer, who's here somewhere. That's Superman Kammer. And recently I did State v. Okafor, which was a case that I hoped that Tony helped me with considerably, and a bunch of others where a lot of people were protected on Florida's death row from a weird Hearst issue. And then Danny Doyle just this year, where the Philly Chew, people here from Philly? Yeah, there are. Philly Chew worked with me in the shadows, and we won relief for someone who had been on the row forever. So, lessons learned. Oh, God, Mark. Get out of here. All right. First lesson I tell volunteers is 5 years in reverse. It's an Elvis Costello song. It's always a way to get to hell. It's also a way to get out of trouble in harm's way. Because if you're in a circuit court, you don't want to be there. You want to go in reverse. So you go to the district court. If you're in the district court, you don't want to be there. So you go to the state court. Always try to go backwards. Wait a minute, we want to put on a new suit and argue this case in the Supreme Court. No, you don't. You do not want to do that. This one is a little more weird, but it's called Beginner's Mind. I owe this to my brother. To an expert, and that's what I am, there are few possibilities. But to a beginner, there are infinite possibilities. So, when you're an old pro, and people say something, you go, "Nah, it won't work." So wait a minute. You should develop a beginner's mind yourself, and certainly listen to beginners. And this is the last one. No, I've got one more after this. This is Obama saying, this is about empathy. Prisoners are Americans too and deserve humane treatment. This is a guiding hand. I see those young men on corners and in prisons, and I think that could be me. The main difference, I had a more forgiving environment. When I messed up, I had a second chance. If you've got a law clerk saying that to a judge, or saying this even better, they had no margin for error, you're in clover. If that's what they're thinking about instead of the facts of the crime, you're doing quite well. All right, and so he became the first sitting president actually to visit an FCI, a Federal Correctional Institute. There it is. All right, and last is Wendy, who's sitting here with me. I guess I don't need to say anything, but she truly is a scholar and tactician. She was trained as a librarian, actually, and knows law inside out. And when I say, "Hey, no, the law is so-and-so," she goes, "No, it's not," and corrects me and fixes it. Or I say, "Well, that case said so-and-so." She goes, "What have you been smoking?" It doesn't say that. So she can be ass kicker as well as a scholar and tactician. And so the love and mentor and guiding hand to me. So thank you all again. How long is that? 40 minutes?
Here we go. All right. So I hear that Tony Amsterdam's a tough act to follow, but I'm not sure there's really any words after that. Mark, thank you so much. We are honored, truly honored to be able to present this award to you. Thank you for being here tonight, for taking us all down memory lane here, and for recognizing so many incredible people who you say have helped you, but I know who you have helped in spades. So thank you so much. So I am now going to quickly turn it over to Denny LeBoeuf again, is going to come up. She's doing double duty tonight. So thank you, Denny, to introduce our keynote speaker, Sister Helen.
Who's going to be short?
Helen, you are short. I mean, there's not much you can do about that. That was really profound to populate this room with all those people, some of them gone and dearly missed. And to say the obvious that everyone here knows, the death penalty is a human rights violation. Most of the rest of the world knows this. By far, most of the countries of our planet have abolished, either de facto or de jure, the death penalty. The reason that the United States still has the death penalty is because we held on to slavery so long, because we followed the enslavement, kidnapping and enslavement of Africans with convict leasing, segregation and Jim Crow, and mass incarceration. That's why we still have the death penalty. When we abolish, and we will, all the people Mark mentioned, all the people in this room, many, 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 many people whose ordinary lives were altered by a crime or by being touched by a human being who was on death row will have had a hand in it. What Helen said when she first confronted with this horror was, we are all better than the worst thing we've ever done. And when the day comes that we get abolition, the short, very dear, very smart, very energetic, and very brilliant writer, teacher, and activist, Sister Helen Prejean, will be one of the reasons.
Well, dang, Mark. I was so deeply touched because I got into this knowing nothing. Bona fide nun, teaching 7th and 8th grade boys English, grammar, and religion, and fell into this thing. Maybe y'all all feel you fell into it too, but I really fell into it. When Tim Robbins was working on the blooming screenplay for the movie A Dead Man Walking, he kept saying with his little grin, the nun is in over her head. Is that for emphasis?
Let's try that again.
I think it means I said something profound. I'm just saying. Okay, I'll try not to be so loud. I'll back up a little bit. So Tim, all while he's doing the movie A Dead Man Walking, the book, kept saying the nun's in over her head. And if you see Susan Sarandon in that movie, you see you don't have a nun walking into prison in charge. See them big eyes there is going, I didn't know what I was doing. And it was the compassion that I kept thinking of the St. Bonaventure quote, don't ask just for understanding. Ask for the fire. Ask for the fire. And so here I am, first of all, awakening to justice, and that's in my book, River of Fire. First, I had to awaken that to be a follower of Jesus in the deep religious tradition, and that's true in Judaism too, I'm looking at my friend Marshall here, you can't just be charitable to people around you, all of whom are privileged, all of whom have had, great educations and everything. It's about justice. It's about understanding about the systems. Understand about you're in privilege because you had a wonderful mom and daddy. Daddy was a lawyer, taught you to think, taught you to read, taught you to make arguments. You had great nuns, teachers. You became a public speaker when you were in high school in your junior year. You were handed all this stuff. And I love the words of Jesus, and I think about it of everybody in this room tonight with Mark and Wendy and all of us. Blessed are your eyes that see what you see, and hearts that feel what you feel, because we can call it grace to be awake. We could have spent our whole lives involved in trivial stuff and not being awake to the deep human rights issues of our day, but we are awake. And to be awake, because I was 40 before I woke up. I think God's given me a long life so I could do something with it. But to wake up about stuff and to have that fire in your heart to take those cases. I've accompanied 6 people to execution. Many of them didn't have a chance. I'm with a man now on death row 30 years. 30 years and he's innocent. And what happened to him in this case in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, of what the prosecutor did, of what they hid and how they lied, 30 years. He's still on death row. Those Venable people out there, I'm going to write a book. I got to write Manuel's story, Manuel Ortiz. If any of y'all want to see me afterwards, just a few ideas about what I can do. I'm going to write the book, but it's not going to be enough to write a book. I don't know what to do to get him in the courts. What can we do? And he says to me, please, Sister Helen, he's from El Salvador, do not let me leave Angola in a pine box, because the other death penalty is take away the death penalty, and then he gets life without parole and he dies at Angola. The other death in prison. And I don't know exactly. I know I want to try to write, not try, I will write a book about this, but I know he's going to need something else creative. Just open to ideas. So Mark Olive. Here I get a phone call. I never know how I'm going to get these people on death row. I don't seek them out. They come to me, all right? And I get a phone call from this guy, Richard Glossop. And here's the voice on the phone. Sister Helen, I apologize. I know I didn't ask your permission or nothing, but I think they're going to execute me here in Oklahoma. I didn't ask your permission. I'm sorry, but would you be with me if I'm executed? I hear that voice. I know that voice. I had just written a book, The Death of Innocence, about 2 innocent people I had accompanied to execution, Joseph Odell in Virginia and Dobie Gillis Williams in New Orleans, in Louisiana. Breaks your heart. African-American man. Atkins happened a few years after he was executed. He had an IQ of 65, and they killed him. And here's this voice on the phone. And you know this, everybody sitting in this room knows this, about what vocation means. It means to get a call, to get a summons. Would you do this? Would you take this case? Would you be part of this? And you say yes. A part of you says yes sometimes ahead of you. Your soul's ahead of you, and you don't even know why. But you say yes, and you put your boat in the river, and next thing you know, you are in Whitewater Rapids, and it's life or death. And sometimes they die, and you're with them. And sometimes, please God, you have a victory, and that human life is saved. And Mark was ticking them all off there, but each one of those human lives, the difference between life and death, and we get to be a small part of that. So here's this guy, Richard Glossop. So I know we're going to need to get it. Well, first of all, he asked me to be with him. I say yes. I mean, nobody's going to call me and ask if I'll be with them when they're executed. And I go, too busy, can't do that. No way, you wouldn't either. So I say yes to that. But then at 2 o'clock in the morning, I bolt awake in my bed because I already knew about the 2 people I'd been with who really were innocent and were executed. And I go, from what I know about this case, he's innocent. So I knew what I had to do. So I got on the phone. I called 3 people. One was Susan Sarandon to get on the media because we got to start getting the story out. First thing I learned from Amnesty, create doubt. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Yeah, Rich Glossop even had 2 trials. Called Susan. She and Robert Redford had death row stories on CNN. I knew she could get me on. I said, Susan, because we're buddies. I call her, she responds. I call her sister. She calls me sister. I say I'm the real nun. She knows I'm the real nun. She didn't do any other nun movies after she did Damn Man One. If you see the movie she was in afterwards, she just made sure, because she knew what had happened to Julie Andrews. She got stuck in that nun thing for a long time. Nun thing was over. It was over. But boy, every time I call her, boy, she's in there. She's great. Calls her, called a connection to the Pope. Pope Francis was second. And then I called Denny LeBoeuf. I said, Denny, I need a good lawyer. Who could be a good lawyer for this guy? It looks, and she goes, well, go for the top. Go for Mark Olive, see if he can. Call him up. That laconic voice he's got, answers the phone. And I go, Mark. And here's the Mark thing. Here's the iconic brand name that Mark Olive is going to be known for. I'm known for Dead Man Walking. I got in the vernacular as soon as the movie came out. He's going to be known for being the pickle buster. He said, he's in a pickle. I'm going, yeah, he is. He's in a pickle. We just had a few days to execution. There were 3 times Rich Glossop was almost executed, and that's why I love defense attorneys and people that do the work. You're in the breach, and you're right in there. And Mark, I forgot exactly what y'all did, but there were 2 people on the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals that heard what you said. There were 2, I think, that had reservations, and that was enough to stop the first execution. And, of course, everything else depends on that. He dies with the first, it's over. And then there were 2 others on the brink like that. And then I called another friend of mine, who also, Don Knight, who from Colorado, and he took the case, and he's been working it ever since. But these 2 men have saved Richard Glossop's life. We had 11-zip decision of the Supreme Court to stay the execution. You have the daggone attorney General of the bloomin' state filing with the Supreme Court, admitting the state made an error. And so we're hopeful that they're going to grant cert on that. Some of the groups I love to talk to the most are defense attorneys. I've talked to them in Mississippi and different states of defense attorneys who get in there with people. Often that defense attorney is the only dignity that people, their clients, ever have, of people who care for them and show it. And I love you. I love what you do. I'm glad to be in your company. Glad to hear every one of those stories tonight. So Mark is the last one to say, yeah, hold me up, yeah, I'm the hero. Look at all the people he brought in who deserve the Guiding Hand Award, as do we all. Look, may we do it with passion and with love. And when we gather at events like this tonight around Mark, but around all the people who have done this great work, it's like there's the fire, we're blowing on the coals to keep that flame burning. I mean, St. Paul said, stir into flame the gift of God that is in our souls. And that's what we're doing around you tonight, Mark, and you and all of you. So thank you for letting me be here and for feeding me, for giving me some wine and being in great company. And may everybody have a great life, do great work. And thank you for letting me be a little part of this. Thank you.
Nervous about this mic. Thank you, Sister Helen. So I realize I am the last thing between you and, at least for the people in the room, and your dinner. People online, maybe they've been eating, but people in the room, I know you're waiting on dinner, so I won't draw this out. I want to thank everyone who is here, everyone who joined us on the live stream. They don't pay me unless I make a pitch, so for the law firm folks here, now that the fire's been lit, we need you to get in touch with me, one of my staff members. Let us tell you how you can get involved. I know you're all involved, but let us tell you how you can do more, what else we can have you do. I hear Venable's got something like, 400 pro bono cases they're working on. What's one more, right? What's one more, right? But truly, we're just so honored to work with each and every one of you to bring together these two amazing communities, the pro bono lawyers, the capital defense attorneys, and use the strengths of each to help the people who need it most. So it is my honor to do that work. I hope that our defender colleagues will remember to call on us when they need help. I hope our law firm colleagues will answer the call when I ask you for help, and we can really go out and make a difference in the lives of individuals who need it. So thank you all. With that, I'm going to say goodbye to the folks on the live stream, and I'm going to release everyone here in the room to get some dinner. There's dinner upstairs and downstairs in the next room. Grab some dinner, come back in, and then we're going to continue the party. Good night, all.